As you may or may not know, this is my first foray into public speaking of this sort, so I thank you for joining me in this experience. I'm filled with gratitude for the opportunity to come together as expressions of divinity. Today we're going to be exploring our oneness, our perception of time, mystical experiences, and how these relate to our understanding of existence. And we're here to talk about you, and we're here to talk about us. From what perspective are you, and what perspective is us? From a certain perspective, you are not you. You are an assembly of cells, a system of sorts. From a closer perspective, those cells are not cells, they are a collection of atoms. To take it in the other direction, from a vast perspective, you are not you are just part of the human race, or you are part of the planet Earth. A system is a set of things working together as parts of a mechanism or an interconnecting network. Every part of this very room is a system. Think about the air we are breathing and air circulation. This reminds me of Zen Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh, who once said, "We are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness." Have you heard of quantum mechanics? According to its laws, nature's building blocks are simultaneously waves and particles with no definite location in space. It takes an outside system observing or measuring them to push them to choose a definitive state. And entangled particles seem to affect one another's choices instantaneously, no matter how far apart they are. This may be the key to some of the most fundamental questions in physics. Some researchers have been studying materials with large numbers of particles entangled rather than simply pairs. When this many-body entanglement happens, physicists observe new states of matter beyond the familiar solid, liquid, and gas, as well as new patterns of entanglement not seen anywhere else. There's a place in the Course in Miracles that says, "In time we exist for and with each other. In timelessness we coexist with God." Most people perceive time strictly as a linear concept, as a series of events that exist in the past, the present, or the future. It can be understood as the basic building block by which we experience reality. While we appear to exist in linear time, we can talk, we can interact, we can communicate and join in experience. Time allows form, which facilitates communication and perspective. According to relativity, the perception of a now, and particularly of a now that moves along in time so that time appears to flow, arises purely as a result of human consciousness and the way our brains are wired. As Einstein himself remarked, people like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. According to Einstein's special theory of relativity, it is impossible to say that in an absolute sense that two distinct events occur at the same time if those events are separated in space. We're going to do a little bit of an example here too, as far as time and perspective. So I have a few cards here. This represents the past. This represents the present. And here's the future. Are these the same distances for this side of the room as for this side of the room? If you're on this side of the room, the past seems a lot closer to the present than the future, and vice versa for this side of the room. We can also collapse this concept to kind of allow ourselves to have a different perspective as far as breaking up this understanding of linear time. Now what do we see? In physics, the relativity of simultaneity is a concept that distant simultaneity, whether two spatially separated events occur at the same time, is not absolute, but depends on the observer's frame of reference. Say your friend travels to a planet 4 light years away. This is hypothetical, of course. The concept of now is smeared across space in a way. This is referred to as the expanded present. If you were to observe what your friend was doing from a vantage point on Earth, you would actually be seeing what happened 4 years ago. Edgar Cayce once said, "There is no time, it is one time. There is no space, it is one space." What's the science behind that? Well, I'm no theoretical physicist, but I would like to read you an abstract of a paper written in 2017 called "The Geometry of Psychological Time," because there are people working on it. One of them is an astrophysicist named Methode Zeniga. The aim of this contribution is to demonstrate that this theory represents a cognate starting point for a deeper understanding of the altered states of consciousness in their temporo-spatial aspects, as it is shown in particular that the three most abundant groups of pathological perceptions of time, namely the feeling of timelessness, or eternity, time standing still, as well as the experience of the dominating past, can well be modeled by singular time configurations, represented by specific pencils of conics. We're going to leave the equations out of this. We could talk for a week on this. Being speculative, the paper is also offered to stimulate further research into the possible links between mathematics and physics on one side and psychology, psychiatry, and philosophy on the other. To me, it seems this paper is talking about mystical experiences. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a mystic is a person who seeks by contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with or absorption into the deity or the absolute, or who believes in spiritual apprehension of truths that are beyond the intellect. Author and speaker John Mundy describes mysticism as an experience, also a way of seeing and a process of being and becoming. So, are you ready to get mystical? All right, well, it's time to get mystical. Wait, let's flip that around. Perhaps it's mystical to not get time. Let's look to whom many consider to be enlightened individuals for inspiration. George Fox, the founder of the Society of Friends, or known as the Quakers, has said that God could only be found experientially, that there is something of the inward light in anyone and everyone, and anyone can make direct contact with God. Or we have a poem from Rumi. "We are the mirror as well as the face in it. We are tasting the taste of this minute of eternity. We are pain and what cures pain both. We are the sweet cold water and the jar that pours." Or another one. "Don't worry about anything at all. You are not here by accident. This form is just a costume for a while, but the one who is behind the costume, this one is eternal. You must know this. If you know this and trust this, you don't have to worry about anything. The world is so full of love, and your heart, your being, is so full of love, so full of peace. You don't have to go to someplace else to find peace. It is right where you are." Does anybody know who that was? Those were Mooji's words. I know we probably have some Eckhart Tolle fans in here, so I included a reference from Eckhart too. This is one of his mystical experiences. It starts, "I cannot live with myself any longer. This was the thought that kept repeating itself in my mind. Then suddenly I became aware of what a peculiar thought it was. Am I one or two? If I cannot live with myself, there must be two of me, the I self and the self that I cannot live with. Maybe I thought only one of them is real. I was so stunned by the strange realization that my mind stopped, fully conscious, but there were no more thoughts. I felt drawn into what seemed like a vortex of energy. It was a slow movement at first and then accelerated. I was gripped by an intense fear and my body started to shake. I had heard the words resist nothing as is spoken inside my chest. I could feel myself being sucked into a void. It felt as if the void was inside myself rather than the outside. Suddenly there was no more fear, and I let myself fall into that void. I have no recollection of what happened after that. I was awakened by the chirping of a bird outside the window. I had never heard such a sound before. My eyes were still closed, and I saw the image of a precious diamond. Yes, if a diamond could still make a sound, this is what it would be like. I opened my eyes. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. Without any thought, I knew that there is infinitely more to light than we realize. The soft luminosity filtering through the curtains was love itself. Tears came into my eyes. I got up and walked around the room. I recognized the room, yet I knew that I had never truly seen it before. Everything was fresh and pristine, as if it had just come into existence. I picked up things, a pencil, an empty bottle, marveling at the beauty and aliveness of it all. That day I walked around the city in utter amazement at the miracle of life on earth, as if I'd just been born into this world. Paramahasana Yogananda explains it in this way. The divine dispersion of rays poured from an eternal source, blazing into galaxies, transfigured with ineffable auras. Again and again, I saw the beams condense into constellations, then revolve into sheets of transparent flame. By rhythmic reversion, sextillion worlds passed into diaphanous luster, then fire became permanent. I cognized the center of the Empyrean as a point of intuitive perception in my heart. Irradiating perception in my heart, issued from my nucleus to every part of the universal structure. Blissful Amrita, nectar of immortality, pulsed through me with a quicksilver-like fluidity. The creative voice of God I heard resounding as Om, the vibration of the cosmic motor. We can look to any number of traditions and see references to this. I'm going to continue along with a reading from The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, who describes the great light. It is impossible, perhaps, to put into words or into print what a mystic sometimes sees, and it is as hard to believe it as it is to put into words. But there is a certain inner sense which at times sees reality in a flash, which illuminates the whole being with a great flood of light. This, too, may seem like an illusion unless the testimony were complete. For every mystic has had this experience, but some have had it to a greater degree than others. Jesus was the greatest of all mystics, and once at least, after a period of illumination, his face was so bright that his followers could not look upon it. In moments of deep realization, the great mystics have all sensed that one life flows through all, and that they all are some part of that life. They have also seen substance, a fine white brilliant stuff forever falling into everything, a substance indestructible and eternal. At times, the realization has been so complete that they have actually been blinded by the light. There are instances where, for several days after such an experience, the one having it could not be seen or could not see on the physical plane, for he had seen the inner light. Remember, all of this takes place when in a perfectly normal state of mind, and it has nothing whatever to do with the psychic state. It is not an illusion, but a reality. And it is during these periods that real revelation comes. Perhaps a good illustration would be to suppose a large group of people in a room together, but unaware of each other's presence. Each is busy with his own personal affairs. We will suppose the place to be dark and that someone comes in and takes a flashlight picture of the room and its occupants. Should this picture be shown to anyone who was in the room before it was taken, it might be hard for him to believe that all the objects in the picture were actually in the room. This, of course, is a poor analogy, but it does serve to elucidate a point. In flashes of illumination, the inspired have seen into the very center. I'd like to move on to more common folk now. I have some additional testimonials and near-death experiences. This is a testimonial that's from a book called An Experience of Timelessness, Exceptional Human Experience by W.G. Broad. The moving window of the present becomes wider and wider and moves increasingly outward in two temporal directions at once. It is as though things are piling up in an ever-widening present. The now is becoming very thick and crowded. Past events do not fall away and cease to be. Rather, they continue and occupy this ever-widening present. Future events already are, and they too are filling this increasingly thick and full present moment. The moment continues to grow, expand, fill until it contains all things, all events. It is so full, so crowded, so thick that everything begins to blend together. Distinctions blur, boundaries melt away. Everything becomes increasingly homogeneous. Like an infinite expanse of gelatin, my own boundaries dissolve, my individuality melts away. The moment is so full that there no longer are separate things. There is no thing here. There are no distinctions. The following, I have about 4 or 5 of these near-death experiences. This is from the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I went to a place of knowledge where I knew everything. It was here that I knew that there was no such thing as time or space. It was here that I realized that I had created all of the melodramas in my life, and it made me laugh. I call that my cosmic giggle. I went into a flow of oneness that I think is God. I call that the isness. It is a state of bliss where I am all there is. It is formless. It is like waking from a nightmare and finding yourself safe at home. Life on earth is the dream, and the oneness bliss is the reality that you wake up into safe and sound. This one. What I felt after kept me going for a while. The state of absolute bliss I experienced was a feeling of oneness with all things. Once again, the negative energy from this experience of the world was eliminated in the light. I was filled with love. How do I describe the feeling? Other than to say it's kind of like the movie The Highlander, I am everything. I know everything. I am one with everything. From the day I recovered up until now, my gift has been to experience the mystical, the blessing to be in tune with the almighty source of all things. Another. I had an accident involving head trauma that led to an out-of-body ride in 1989. During this experience, I believe that I experienced who I truly am, my higher self and purpose. I felt connected to a powerful source, a oneness which is spiritual and more real than this bodily existence. I felt loved, understood, powerful, and meaningful. I felt connected to all knowledge and had a sense of knowing about all life, past and future. I felt a most important purpose to my being both here and there. I experienced a moment of clarity, which is living without fear or judgment, and how important it is to find this in ourselves, to be who we truly are. Another one. Then he appeared, the divine supreme intelligence, God. The light that surrounded him, that enveloped him, that was him, was almost blinding. I could not see his face. Only the brightest of brightest lights. He was love. I felt it. I knew it. I knew him. I was part of him. I was love. All there were total love with him and of him. It was glorious. I never wanted to leave his presence. I knew that he would never leave mine, even if I chose to return to earth. He was part of, or rather the whole of me, and I was the whole of him. In things, all things there were in oneness. I had no body, but I was a point of higher consciousness. A spiritual being telepathically was embracing me with love and peace like I had never known. I felt connected and oneness with all of life. In theology, the doctrine of divine simplicity says that God is without parts. I acknowledge this truth in each one of you as a reflection of this innocent simplicity. I bring all these examples to you today from my understanding of truth and through my interpretation of symbols. May their meaning for you have meaning in us. I myself have had a mystical experience which is reflected in the selections above. For a long time, I lived my life as though this eternal truth, this heaven, would be there waiting when I died. I explored many paths to get back there, but it wasn't until I found A Course in Miracles that I recognized the very practical application of approaching eternity. In the stream of this dream, the lessons for me center around relationships and joining in purpose. Some may say a higher purpose. It's really about forgiveness, and true forgiveness is non-judgment. The lesson/prayer I passed out on your seats is a lesson from the Course in Miracles, and I invite you to join me in its conveyance. So this is lesson 262. You're welcome to join in. You're welcome not to join in, whatever you're comfortable with. Let me perceive no differences today. Father, you have one Son, and it is He that I would look upon today. It is your one creation. Why should I perceive 1,000 forms in what remains as one? Why should I give this one 1,000 names when only one suffices? For your Son must bear your name, for you created him. Let me not see him as a stranger to his Father, nor as a stranger to myself. For he is part of you, and I of him. And we are part of you, who are one source, who are our source, in your love, eternally the Holy Son of God. We who are one would recognize this day the truth about ourselves. We would come home and rest in unity. For there is peace, and nowhere else can peace be sought and found. I have another reading, another excerpt from the Course that ties it all together with the time aspect. Only in time does interference in God's completion seem to be possible. The bridge that He would carry you across lifts you from time into eternity. Waken from time and answer fearlessly the call of Him who gave eternity to you in your creation. On this side of the bridge to timelessness, you understand nothing. But as you step lightly across it, upheld by timelessness, you are directed straight to the heart of God. At its center, and only there, you are safe forever, because you are complete forever. There is no veil the love of God in us together cannot lift. The way to truth is open. Follow it with me. So now, the hour, oh, you are, is upon us. Let us now try to reflect our oneness in a very practical way, as expressions of divinity are reflections of shared purpose and presence, are welcome and blessed as communion.